Hey everybody, it's your buddy Beard Grizzly, and this is This Week at Bungie, or, you know, one of them, because I haven't necessarily covered all of the This Week at Bungie, but that's beside the point. This one's a little different. This one is a little bit more special. It's the one that, especially coming off of our last topic that we talked about, is more important because we finally get some answers to a lot of questions that we've needed answering. And I think overall this is a good step in the right direction. And I do just have to say that. I don't think this is going to fix a lot of things for people, but it is great for everybody that is out there, at least to kind of see the step in that direction, the way that it needs to go. And overall, between reading the TWAB or TWAB or anything else, I call it TWAB, deal with it, and also the podcast that they released here today, I think overall, long story short, there's a lot of positive notions that we can get from what has actually been outlined by the development staff and those at the head. But before I really get into what I mean, I've got to call out a couple things, and first is to actually call out Deej. If anybody hasn't been on Twitter, if you don't really follow Twitter too much, and I sometimes don't blame you whatsoever, the biggest thing that I want to say is that Deej has been awesome the last at least 24 hours with getting and talking to everybody that pops up and pops in, along with over on Reddit too. He's been commenting and tweeting back to everybody that he can with comments and ideas on what it is that's going on, asking for us to be a little bit more patient with why it is that they needed to take the time that they did and why it is that they needed to outline things instead of going on to a live stream. And that, I think, was very important to have him in that place. I've always been a fan of Deej. I've always liked what it is that he does. He's the community head, if you will. He's at least one of them, because Cosmo has actually been out as well, taking care of his family because they just had a baby. Like, there's so much that actually sounds like there is actually going on at Bungie, and I have to give them, again, at least Deej and Cosmo, a lot of credit for what it is that they've done. And I again have to give a lot of credit actually towards Luke Smith, Mark Noseworthy, and Eric Osbourne, because instead of doing this stream like they were supposed to today, they decided it was a better idea to take a step back and outline the development process and give us a better idea of what's to come within the next month or so of what Destiny will be. And I think this was a great idea overall. This was a good step again in the right direction. And again, it's not an end-all fix. This is just a good step. But let's actually move into a couple things that they covered on the podcast, because I think that's where a lot of you may not actually kind of get a chance to listen to it, but I actually would recommend it. If I remember, I will have a link in the description below. You guys can click on that and give it a listen when you can. It's, to me, well worth it, and it actually outlines a lot of the development process and why they can and can't do certain things. But anyway, let's move on. The biggest thing with the podcast is that they admitted right off the bat, pretty well right off the bat anyway, that they effed up. They effed up hard, and they have been effing up, just to the point that they haven't been communicating things to us very well, and that we overall need to hear a little bit more from them. And I can't think of anybody else that would otherwise disagree with that. We've needed to hear from them on what it is that they're doing for a long time now, and for them to admit it and say something, that's kind of good enough an apology for me, so long as they actually showcase it in other places. I think a written apology would also be great, but they kind of did something with TWAB. Moving on. They talk about the ideas of the XP grind and how that needed to change and what actually goes into the development process on that, and I did appreciate that they did. I did also appreciate that they kind of covered that, yes, there will be people that will call us out on it, and yes, there will be people that were not really happy with what we did, and there's two sides to it. Definitely, and on what they outlined, which I think was great, they basically gave the idea that they weren't sure how the system was actually going to handle being turned off. So they made the executive decision to just flip the switch, toggle off the XP system, and just hope that they can get something together later. And that was something that they did kind of spur of the moment, and it's kind of interesting to listen to the fact that they had to do it that way, that it was a gamble. Now, added, they also called out several people that were involved in kind of unearthing all the stuff that happened with the XP grind system, and I at least like that they did. They were actually joking, or maybe they were all that serious that they actually do want to present some job opportunities to them. And the graphs that were presented over on Reddit for the XP system was fantastic. They did a very good job. But the overall idea was just that, yes, things take time to get figured out. Things take time to look over and analyze, and you can't just flip a switch in a lot of cases like this was to make sure that everything goes. Again, it was a gamble to think that they could just turn off this XP system and hopefully kind of change things up. Or again, at least so they say. We don't know the inner workings on a lot of this code and how it's all placed together. We don't have those engines that are sitting there. And unless somebody can, really dig into it, put the game into a coding engine and look at it, that's the kind of stuff that I leave to other people to really figure out. But I did just appreciate that they were okay with admitting that, yeah, they kind of screwed up in the beginning, and it was nice of them. I definitely do appreciate what it is that Mark Noseworthy, Luke Smith, and Eric Osbourne did on that podcast, and again, I think it's definitely worth a listen. There's still some things in there I don't necessarily agree with, but there's, for the most part, again, I think it was a really good listen, and you can kind of judge for yourself on how that's going. But if you're that concerned, I'm not going to take anything that they said out of context, outside of just my own interpretations from when I heard it. I think it's better that you hear it all just in that streamlined fashion that they gave us on the podcast. And that's a very important thing to listen to. But anyway, let's actually move on to the thing you're here for, which is This Week at Bungie. I do want to actually read the opening statement, because I think this is a good way, and like I said, there are kind of written apology behind everything. So here we go. Hey everyone, with Destiny 2's console and PC launches behind us, we want to take time to talk with you about Destiny 2, specifically where it's at today and where it's going. Our team has been reading feedback and working on updates to improve the game. We've also been reading some tough criticism about our lack of communication, and we agree we need to be more open. Going forward, Destiny 2's post-launch game systems, features, and updates are being designed specifically to focus on and support players who want Destiny to be their hobby, the game they return to, and a game where friendships are made. We want Destiny to be a game that fits into your life, providing you with reasons to log in and play with your friends, clans, and families. We want Destiny to be a world you want to be a part of. A month ago, we published a list of improvements on the blog. Today, we're going to revisit that list and update its status, and share some of the work the team is readying for December, January, and beyond. We know it's frustrating when there isn't enough of a dialogue with the development team. You have our commitment that we're going to do a better job going forward. Luke Smith and Chris Barrett. Now, Luke Smith, of course, is the main director behind all of Destiny 2. Chris Barrett is, to my knowledge, completely the guy that's in charge of a lot of the live team and development, and that's actually where I figured that a lot of this kind of thought was going to come from. And I'm anxious to see what the live team can do. That all being said, you're now being held to this commitment, Bungie, and I hope you keep up with it, because this is kind of where I think the last straw is going to be for a number of other people that haven't been there yet. So, you've made the commitment. I would love to see you keep going with this kind of stuff. Just kind of like what you did previously in Destiny 1 before you ended up pulling a lot of the live team off of the game, or the core team off of the game, and just left it to the live guys to handle. This kind of stuff is what I want to see. And I think communication is realistically the main idea why I'm focusing so hard on it here with This Week at Bungie, only because the communication like this hasn't been done in a while, and that's what Bungie needs to kind of focus on. Otherwise, what kind of stuff is it that we can kind of expect? Well, the first big thing is a system called Masterworks. Masterworks is going to be implemented, from what I'm seeing so far, on December 12th. Masterworks are basically ways that you can improve on your current legendary gear. Certain legendaries will actually already have them enforced, others will not by the sounds of things. We're not really sure how the system is going to work, or if it's absolutely every legendary, or if it is only certain ones. For the wording they have here, it could go either way. That's why I'm confused. And I think that's where, if nothing else, the writing that is done on the This Week at Bungie, if this is going to be communication, let's be frank, this kind of stuff needs to be worked on. But aside from this and one other thing that's out there, there's not a lot of additional grind that we're seeing right now with the game. In a lot of ways that's okay, but in another way, we need to see what other stuff is going to be here to actually keep us coming back. And again, it's going to take stepping stones. This is a step, like I said, in the right direction. But Masterworks will allow you to kind of customize the weapon in different mannerisms and add an extra bit of flavor to it. The Masterworks icon apparently can be rolled for certain things, and I'm guessing it's just that 10 and reload speed we see. That'll probably be allowed for changes. While the base perk, and they outline it later down the line here, the idea of Masterworks is that they will generate orbs for you and your allies on multi-kills. Now this is kind of a cool idea because it almost does seem like it's an exotic weapon item, but realistically, this is the kind of stuff that I would expect to see, like I said, on an exotic, not a legendary. That's why I'm wondering how rare some of this stuff is going to be for the legendaries to have these Masterworks slots. And again, it's not, at least from what I'm seeing here, necessarily outlined completely if every single one of them is going to be, every single legendary weapon is going to have an option for that, or if it's only going to be certain ones to start with. I should explain myself a little bit further. That's not atypical of a lot of MMOs or other games to kind of slowly implement things like that onto certain weapons, but I would hope it would be on everything, only because realistically our weapon selection and the stuff that we use is pretty limited to begin with. We have those certain weapons that work very well versus the others that don't necessarily work too well, and I would hate to see it on something, if you put it on an out of options SMG versus having it on another SMG, that if you don't put it on Mida, for God's sake, Mida Mini Tool at least, or a couple other SMGs that I have, but you put it on out of options, personally I would be a little disappointed. But that's again just to kind of explain myself. I don't think I'm explaining myself very well, but oh well, I hope some of you get it. The other thing about Masterworks, they're going to continue to go ahead and have this option of tracking your kills with that weapon specifically, and I don't know where this idea of kill tracking really jumped in, because I know it wasn't something I was entirely interested in. I thought it was cute with the ghost shell being able to track your PvE and PvP kills, but I personally don't use it. I don't necessarily get the fascination behind it. It's for somebody else. Definitely not me. Whatever. And to kind of go into how you get a Masterworks item, Masterworks drop from any source of legendary weapons for characters above 250 power. And that's a good mark to kind of hit. It's pretty easy for a lot of people to get there, and especially if you've been playing since September or anywhere in between, really, you probably already have a character that's there. Usually the grind kind of slows down about 262. It always seems like the point that I hit on all my new characters, and it just kind of flatlines. But anyway, unwanted Masterworks can be dismantled into materials that can upgrade an existing legendary weapon into a Masterwork. Again, this might answer my question that it is every single legendary, but it's not necessarily too clear. I think we'll see a little bit more on it once those actual patch notes come out, so this is just details to kind of get the ideas. But the other thing that they're implementing to allow for a little bit more of a grind is armor ornaments. Those are coming back a lot quicker than, of course, we had them in Destiny 1, even though I would have kind of hoped that they would have been there to begin with, but it's art. It takes a little bit more time to end up writing or drawing or figuring out some other styles or anything that exists in terms of these pieces of equipment. And that's what they're doing with a few of the factions so far. The ones that they have listed for Season 2, it's the Vanguard faction, Crucible faction, Trials of the Nine, Iron Banner, Dead Orbit, Future War Cult, New Monarchy, and the Eater of Worlds Raid Lair armor. So per that point, all of these are going to have the options of these ornaments that you can place on them and look a little different or a little bit more counter and add a little bit more depth to the armor pieces that we already have. I've always been a personal fan of the way that ornaments work, and I'm definitely excited to see how many of them they put into the game, but it does seem like there's only this one layer so far, and I wouldn't expect that they would add anything more, honestly, at least for now. And in last week's This Week at Bungie, they actually outlined the ideas of wanting vendors to open up a little bit more, to have the availability to buy the stuff directly from them instead of getting it through RNG, and I think this is a great move. The fact that we can now go ahead and buy this stuff instead of just relying on RNG is important. Highly important, and again a step in the right direction for what it is that we're looking for. The weapons and armor do seem like they're kind of locked now behind a bit of an engram loop, if you will, and you do seem like you have to actually donate some of the faction tokens to engrams in order to unlock them. To show you what I mean, and hopefully I'm interpreting it properly, but if you look at this picture with Shaxx, you'll see in the red text, it says, claim 2 reward engrams to unlock. This means that you'll have to get 2 engrams in order to actually unlock this functionality to buy this cape that's sitting here for the hunter. And that's at least the starting point in order for you to actually get a hold of this gear. It's realistically no different from how it used to be in Destiny 1, where you could actually go ahead and purchase these items, but you had to be like rank 2, rank 3, so on. They have also stated too that if you already meet these requirements, if you've already turned in the amount of engrams needed, you already fit it, you can already buy that stuff. And that's good for anybody that's actually put in the time and effort to these factions already. So for anybody that's already in the game, you've got this stuff opened up already. There's no additional grind you have to worry about. Though, I might say that's a bad thing in a way, because I kind of want more of a grind, but less of a... Anyway. Now let's talk about Xur, because Xur brings a very popular item back, and depending what camp you're in, you might be happy about this, you might not be. I don't know how to feel about it. Anyway, the first thing that he has at the top is called an isochronal engram, and it actually comes back to you every week. You have the availability, you can purchase one of these from him every single week, and then from there, next week it'll reset, so on. But it gives you the availability to get an exotic that you haven't had in your catalog at all yet. So this is an easier way to kind of fill up your collection listing, especially for exotics at the very least. He'll still come equipped with this typical stuff that he has. You'll have your 1 weapon, and then also you'll have the 3 other items that are here. The boots, though, that are sitting there for the hunter, I'm interested in those because that is a definite new exotic item. That actual eye that's sitting there, oh, that's for Curse of Osiris gear. We've seen that a couple places in amongst the other loot that's here with either Shaxx or Saladin. But the item underneath it all is the important thing. He has a consumable, and yes, that is a 3 of coins. The idea behind the 3 of coins now, though, is that you can actually have it as a buff. You apply it to your character, it'll stay there for 4 hours, and it increases your chance of getting an exotic engram through all sources. I'm assuming what they mean by this is that you'll be able to get it through boss kills, you'll be able to get it even through standard kills off of standard mobs, either through chests of public events or anything else, but it's another way for you to get some more exotic chances. But that's Xur. I do like what he has here. I like the idea of being able to actually use our shards for something regardless of what it might be, but that's been a needed inclusion for a while. But we get to the other big vendor, which is actually Banshee, the gunsmith, because mods are a very big thing for us in the Destiny community, and definitely for our weapons, equipment, and everything else. They are changing the way that this works. Every day he's going to have a change out and a loadout on these mod options, so you can kind of check back every day. The idea, though, he'll be able to sell, it looks like, different mod capabilities to you just straight, instead of having to random roll for the things. What I'm going to guess from this, and again, it's just a guess, we'll have 1 weapon mod that's there that's legendary, and then we'll have 2 armor mods that are legendary each day. It looks like 5 mod components are needed with 10 legendary shards. So, again, I kind of hope you've been keeping your shards, because it does look like the economy for shards is going to be pretty significant and pretty high in terms of usage. And I can definitely see a lot of people blowing through their shards very quickly, considering, well, 1, we've probably got a lot of them that are sitting there unless you've just been breaking down your weapons from your vaults, but otherwise, I can see us still going through them very quickly, because 10 at a shot for a single thing or a single item is pretty fast. And then once you look at the isochronal being 97 legendary shards, that's another big boost. And there are some other minor changes that they're putting into effect, like the exploit safeguards and a few other things to kind of cut down on how often we will actually get rewards from going to a resource node or a chest. You know, sometimes you don't get anything if you have that happen to you. Happens to me a lot because I stay in the same area. Anyway, but there are some things that they didn't talk too heavily about, but at least wanted to tell us that it is on the way. And those kind of things are prestige reward improvements, so we can finally get a little bit more out of our prestige raids. I don't play them anyway, so it doesn't matter for me. Private matches, which will actually be included again later on, either January or somewhere early 2018 they had mentioned. Ranked play, and also a extra reward setting, it sounds, for competitive play. As well as also having a disqualifier for anybody that leaves a competitive and ranked mode early. Stuff like that can actually be incorporated as early as next year. And there will be some other mod changes that will actually come too, from Banshee or otherwise, so we might see some other changes to the system more than what we already see. Now, this also goes in tandem with the fact that we also have Curse of Osiris on the way, and that is something else that kind of gets incorporated into everything. Another set of loot that we can actually pick up, or another set of activities that might be available, even if it is just another world, and they might have their own systems that are kind of filtered into this that we don't necessarily know too much about. But again, we will kind of have to see where it all plays out. That's the problem right now. We don't necessarily know too much on that end, outside of what they've, of course, kind of showcased for us. And just to end out this week at Bungie, I will just read what they have at the bottom here. The future. Going forward, we plan to continue this dialogue as openly and frequently as possible. This will be an ongoing process, but one that we are committed to. This week, we'll be publishing a new episode of the Bungie podcast where we will sound off on the current state of Destiny 2, how we think about our communication challenges, and what it takes to update the game in the wild. You'll be able to listen on both Apple and Android devices. Thank you for playing, for being passionate about the Destiny 2 experience, and for working with us as we look to continuously improve our game and studio communication. So yeah, this is a complete flip-flop from how I kind of acted yesterday, I know. I know some of you were also kind of concerned for me with how I voiced that video. I do just want to tell you, I'm just extremely tired. Today I actually had a day off, and it's my first day off that I've had in about 10 days. So it was kind of nice to sit and rest and actually have some time to myself. But it was also a great thing to kind of see what Bungie ended up producing for us here. We needed this kind of message. We needed to see this kind of message, and this was so important for them to do. But there are a couple challenges that I would end up posing to them. The first big one that I'm going to put out there is, even though this week at Bungie is meant as an overview, it's meant as something to get the idea of how things are, how they act, and so on, I would present that you need to make sure that you are clear with this information and concise with this information from the get-go. And this one did a fair job, but there were a few places that really just, I was confused. Like, I'm still not sure about the Masterwork system. I wasn't necessarily sure what a world or resource token was originally. I had to sit and kind of decipher it. I was like, oh, it's a world collectible. Duh. It's like data lattice. Then again, I'm also not too bright, so there is that. But anyway, that's the base idea that I kind of had when I sat down and I started reading all of this. I like the communication, and again, I think that's what we need to focus on right now. This is the kind of stuff we need to critique on their end, to kind of know what it is that they're doing, on where they're going, on what they want to tell us, and that is the important part right now. Again, I would highly recommend giving the podcast a listen. I will again have that down in the description below for either iTunes or Podbay, and you guys can give that a listen. But highly recommend it. Again, have I said highly recommended enough? I think I did. I think so. Anyway, I think that's going to do it for me today. There's definitely some other stuff that we could talk about. I also didn't talk about anything Crucible related, but I leave that to more interested parties, because as I've stated before, that's not necessarily my thing that I like to cover. But I like the overall impetus here that is listed in terms of how items can be obtained and how the overall quality of life is going to feel. I don't think there's still enough yet that has been outlined for me to continuously come come back to every single day, but I do see that there's a little bit more here for me to jump into the game, at least weekly, because honestly I'm not even doing that sometimes, aside from recording or doing something else of course, but at least actually play the game. I haven't really been doing that for myself even weekly sometimes. But these are the challenges that I think that Bungie has before them, and they're at least communicating that they know that they're there. So again, I think this is a good spot for them. In case you think I'm forgetting about talking about lore entirely, no, I'm just giving them a pass for now because I get that there's a lot of stuff they need to improve. And unfortunately, when it comes to the lore, there are a lot of more important things that kind of take precedence. So realistically, I will give them a pass for now. But you better give me my Grimoire system, Bungie. You better put it in the game. But anyway, now I'm going in a circle, so I really am going to shut up. So you guys know the buttons to press if you liked or disliked this idea, my ramblings and everything else. And if you want to hear more from me, you know the subscribe button to press. If nothing else, I can only ever be Beard Grizzly, and I'll see you next Space Time Guardians. Take care of yourselves.